I think every time I have begun a lesson in the last few weeks in the book of Hebrews, which we've just been there a few weeks, I have talked about that we're writing to people who are kind of turning away from this life of Christ. So last week, as we were beginning in chapter 2, we were talking about drifting away and slowly moving away. My question for you to begin is to make sense of all this. If you're going to drift away or if you're going to turn away from where you currently are, what do you normally turn to? What do you normally turn to? Well, all right, maybe selfish desire.
The opposite of what you were.
All right, the opposite of what you were. Kind of old things. So if I become a Christian and I decide that it wasn't what I thought. I get so discouraged because of this and that and whatever. I'm just going to leave it. I probably go back to what I knew previously. Now, if that's a life of rampant sin, I go back to a life of rampant sin. But what if I had been a Jew? And what if I had been a part of that Jewish religious system? And now I've come out of that and I've become a Christian, but, some years have passed and I've kind of gotten disgusted with a few people along the way. And has that ever happened, by the way? People kind of get us in a mess once in a while in a local congregation. And besides that, I'm just tired of it all for some reason. I'm just discouraged. I quit. I usually go back where? Well, if I'm a Jew, I just go back to Judaism. I kind of go back to where I was in the earlier days. Now, the interesting thing about going back to Judaism is, do I have to change gods? In the old Jewish system, in the old pages of the Old Testament, what God did they worship? The same God that we worship now. So it's the same God. What's the major difference between Judaism and Christianity? Jesus is the main difference. Christ is the main difference. So that might explain to you why the book is called Hebrews. It's written primarily, it seems, to Hebrew people who have become Christians and now are sliding backwards into their old ways. It might also explain to you why the writer of the book of Hebrews is with every breath talking about Jesus. I mean, this book is all about Jesus. Because if you don't recognize the value of Jesus, and you don't recognize the power that He brings to our lives for salvation, you miss it all. So he's going to really speak strongly and powerfully about Christ. It should not surprise us. When Paul preached, what did he say? I preached only Christ and Him crucified. I didn't have any other message. I just preached Christ. And so as we pick up in chapter 2 with some verses, I want to get to the latter part of verse 8 and go forward. I want you just to hear what this writer is saying about Jesus. There won't be a thing new to us, but it might be said in a way that re-emphasizes some things that are really important for us. In putting everything under Him. All right, what did God put under Jesus? Everything. He put Him at His right hand and gave Him all power and all authority. That's why, willing or unwilling, there's coming a day when every knee will what? Bow and confess what? He really is Lord. He really is Lord. It'll be a frightening moment for some people. But that's what's going to happen. Now, we know, and it's going to say here, that in the beginning, Jesus already was over everything. but he made himself subject to the Father, made himself come and become like a man so that this all could work, this thing called Christianity could work. But now he's been taken back. Everything is under him. God left nothing that is not subject to him. Yet at the present, we do not see everything subject to him. That's true, isn't it? I mean, everything is, but some people don't recognize it. And so some people treat him how? How do some people treat him right now? Well, they ignore him, or they speak badly of him, or they call him all kinds of names like he's an imposter or liar. It's been going on all the way through, and so forth. But we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels. Now, why do you think he talked about those angels for so long? Because they're really important parts of what God's orchestrating for everyone. And yet, Jesus was superior to the angels, and yet he was for a while made a little lower than the angels. In fact, he was made like us. Now he's crowned with glory and honored because he suffered death, so that by the grace of God he might taste death for everyone. By God's grace, God's goodness, God's favor, Jesus tasted death for whom? Every single person that ever takes a breath on this earth. He tasted death for everyone. Now, not everyone has chosen to follow him. Not everyone has chosen to make their life obedient to him, but he died for all, for everyone. In bringing many sons to glory, verse 10, it was fitting that God, for whom and through whom everything exists, should make the author of their salvation perfect through suffering. It's always been an interesting verse, and he'll say it in another way later. But Jesus was made perfect through his what? Through his suffering. He became the author of eternal salvation through his suffering. Was it major suffering? Yes. It was major suffering, more than any of us can comprehend, but it's compounded. It's a compounded suffering, knowing who he was and from whence he came to go through all that. I mean, if you are the creator of all these people, and if you are the God who's always been, and yet you're having people to mock you and slap you and spit upon you and finally nail you to a cross. I mean, it's one thing to have it all done to you, but being the one who made them all, what kind of person would be able to do that? I mean, I might just have a moment of weakness and say what? Send those 10,000 angels. Let's give them a dose of what reality is. Don't you think Ken would have done that? Don't you think Ken's... Hey, everybody stop for 1 second. I'll give you a little picture of who you're dealing with here. It would have been hard for me not to do that. And yet, had he done that, everything would have been messed up. Because God's holiness, His perfection in holiness required a sacrifice for sin that required Jesus, who was God, who was in the beginning with God, to come and go through what he went through willingly. So he was made perfect through his what? He was already perfect. But through this kind of suffering, he became the perfect sacrifice for our sins. And that's what this writer is trying to explain. If you're going to go back to Judaism, and you're going to think a goat's going to work for you any longer, you're going to think a dove's going to work for you any longer, You're going to think a calf's going to work for you any longer? I want you to look at what he did. That's what this writer's trying to say. Both the one who makes men holy and those who are made holy are of the same family. Now, that's a really important statement. Both the one who makes men holy and those who are made holy are of the same family. I know you can't remember, but I've stressed it so many, many, many times. Who is the only one in and of himself who is holy? God. God is only one. And the only way anything else can ever become holy, the only way anything else can become holy is that God make it to be holy. Can't be any other way. You can't become holy just by saying, I want to become holy. God has to make you holy. That's why the ground where Moses comes up to the burning bush, God says, take off your what? Sandals, which is all you would like to do right now. So you'd be more comfortable and go back to sleep, go sleep faster. But you take them off not so you can be more comfortable, Moses, because this is what? Holy ground. How did it get holy? God made it holy. Nothing gets holy except God makes it holy. Now, both the one who is holy, he makes us what? He makes us holy. That's why Peter will write, you are a holy nation. You Christians, you are a holy nation. God made you holy through Jesus Christ. Both the one who is holy and those who have been made holy are of the same what? Same family. Now that's interesting. That's interesting. Have you ever thought much about the Queen of England and her family? Even if you're far removed from the Queen of England and that family, ways removed, what does life look like for you? I'd like to get in on that deal. I mean, I would just like to get in on that deal. Don't even call me a prince. Don't even call me a duke. Just get me on that deal somehow, because it's pretty lucrative and pretty easy, it appears to me. There are some families I'd like to get in on. You understand that? I kind of wish Warren Buffett would adopt me. I mean, there are some ideas I have like that once in a while, you know. So, but this family is one we can get in on, and it's better than any family, anywhere, anytime, ever. And we and Jesus, the one who is holy and the one who makes us holy, are now of the same family. That's pretty interesting to me. That's pretty special to me. And he'll emphasize that in just a moment. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them what? Brothers. Brothers. He calls me a brother. He made me, and yet he calls me a brother. Do you think I'm getting a privilege here? Do you think I'm getting a special deal here? So if you're thinking about walking away, you're in the family of God. Jesus calls you not a servant or a slave. Now, Paul might call you that. Paul might call you a bondservant to Jesus Christ. And Paul might call himself that. But right here it says we're really a brother to Christ. I will declare your name to my brothers in the presence of the congregation. I will sing your praises. And again, I'll put trust in Him. And He says, here am I, and the children God has given me. We're the family of Christ, or as Paul would write one time in the book of Ephesians, we are the bride of Christ. We are purchased by Him. Since the children have flesh and blood, He too shared in their humanity, so that by His death He might destroy him who holds the power of death, that is the devil. Since the children are what? Flesh and blood, He also became what? Flesh and blood. so that he might destroy whom? The devil, who messed it all up to begin with. And he frees those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. For surely it's not angels he helps, but Abraham's descendants. For this very reason he made like his brothers. He made to be like his brothers in every way, in order that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in service to God. Now, I don't want you to get lost on Abraham's descendants. If I'm writing to Hebrew Christians who are thinking about going back, to include the word Abraham's descendants probably captures their attention. But as you read in other places in the New Testament, Abraham is no longer his direct descendants who are Jews that are Abraham's descendants. It's whom? Who are the new Abraham descendants? Christians. We're the descendants of Abraham now. We're the ones who are descendants of Abraham because we're the people of faith, he says. So all this to say that Jesus has all things under him. He became flesh. He suffered. He died. He purchased us. And though he made us from dirt, he calls us now brothers. We're in the family of God. One other thing. Verse 18. He himself suffered when he was tempted. Because he did, he's able to help those of us who are being tempted. Pretty powerful. That not only has he done all this, calls us brothers, but we're being tempted. They're being tempted to leave. We're being tempted, in essence, to leave also. Every time Satan tempts you, he's trying to tempt you to what? To turn away. To go somewhere other than where you are. Every single time to turn away. But Jesus was also tempted so that he might be able to what? Identify with us and help us and get us through that. So how do you get a better deal than this? How do you get a better deal than this? God died for us. God left his throne for us. And now he's been given all power and all authority. Remember, I've always said, the God who is the Father. The God who came is the Son. The God who stayed is the Spirit. He did all that so that you and I could be in the family of God. And he even suffered temptation, great temptation. Satan tried everything he could to get Jesus to falter. Get Jesus to falter? I've won. Satan thinks. But he couldn't get Jesus to falter. And now he understands when you and I are tempted to turn away and to walk away, and is there to help. And it says he speaks for us too. He speaks up for us. So, why would you walk away? If you're a Jew reading this, why would you go back to Judaism? But if you are not a Jewish background person, but you become a Christian, and whatever you walked out of, whatever scene in this world you walked out of, why would you go back? Well, I know the power of Satan. I've felt it. I've felt Satan tugging on me frequently. But why wouldn't you stand up and say, get behind me, Satan? Not today, Satan. I'm sticking with the course today, Satan. That's what this is talking about. Just hanging on. So, you hung on without going to sleep. Now you get to go home and go to sleep. So, let's sing.